So hello then, welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Sprite Knight, and in these podcasts I love talking all things movies and TV and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, to be very surprised if you hadn't guessed already, because well, you clicked on the podcast, and also I'm holding a lightsaber for the intro of this podcast today. I'm continuing on with my Star Wars reviews, at least for now, as I review Solo, a Star Wars story. So, let's get into it, shall we? Solo, a Star Wars story. So this was the second of the Star Wars spin-off movies to be released. The first obviously being Rogue One, which was released in 2016. And this movie, Solo, a Star Wars story, was released in May of 2018. Yes, this was the only Disney Star Wars movie to not be released in December. You know, all the other Disney Star Wars movies, including Rogue One, were all released in December of the year they came out. But Solo, a Star Wars story, funnily enough, wasn't. And this film was, well, it's credited as being directed solely by Ron Howard. However, that isn't the case, because during the production of this movie, news got out that, well, initially, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who are best known for directing the Lego Movie, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the 21 and 22 Jump Street movies, and are the two guys behind the animated Spider-Verse films. They were meant to direct this film, and they were signed to direct. It was announced they were going to direct this movie, but about, well, over halfway through production of this film, they were fired. And I haven't heard a specific reason why. Do say in the comment section below if a specific reason as to why Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were fired from this project has been released. But as far as I know, it hasn't been released. But there are reports out there that they were fired from this project because they were encouraging more improvisation. They're trying to make this film more of a comedy, whilst the writers on this film, one of them being Lawrence Kasdan, who's quite a prolific writer, particularly in Lucasfilm. I think he wrote Empire Strikes Back, and he wrote the script of Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, two of the best scripts of all time, arguably. He wrote the script, he co-wrote the script for this film, and he wasn't happy with the way that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were treating this project. So Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were fired from this project over halfway through production, and Ron Howard, who's quite a famous filmmaker himself. You know, Ron Howard is probably best known for directing the likes of Rush, which is an amazing movie, A Beautiful Mind, which I love, Apollo 13, which is a great film, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which is a surprisingly good Christmas movie, which has held up pretty well, and 13 Lives, which I think is a very underrated film, and that was Ron Howard's latest movie. I know he's meant to have a new film coming out later this year, but his latest movie, as of this podcast, is 13 Lives, amongst many other films. Ron Howard has directed a lot of films in his time. He came on to, well, according to reports, reshoot up to over 70% of this film. So that is why he is solely credited as the director of this movie. However, it also sounds like some of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller's vision is still in there, and I think I know where it is, and I'll talk about that a bit later on in this review. But Ron Howard is credited as a director on this film, and in case you haven't guessed already, this film of course follows Han Solo's origin story, something no one had any interest in or were asking for before this film came out. And that was the thing, I wasn't terribly excited about this movie when it came out. I was excited because I get excited about every new Star Wars movie that comes out. But this film came out, it was only like, 5 months after The Last Jedi came out, and I didn't feel, first of all, like I had enough time to get excited with this movie, because I had so much excitement leading up to The Last Jedi, and then usually it takes about a year for me to get excited about the next Star Wars movie, but I wasn't really getting excited for the next Star Wars movie because it was only like 5 months away, and it didn't feel like it was going to come out in 5 months, because barely anything had come out about the movie after The Last Jedi. Barely anything had come out about this film, and also I wasn't particularly excited about the film because I I don't really care about Han Solo's origin story. Han Solo, I think, works perfectly as a character when you see him in the original trilogy and in The Force Awakens, and for that small cameo he has in The Rise of Skywalker. You don't need, going into the cinema, I felt you didn't need to see a Han Solo origin story. I didn't get the point of this movie, and the trailers weren't selling me. The trailers didn't look bad, but they weren't making me go, yeah, that is a film that I really want to see, and I really want to see at the cinema at that. Plus, the film had a troubled production, and the troubled production was quite, it was all over the news. Whenever you look at movie news regarding this movie, everyone would talk about the troubled production that this film had been going through. And that also made me feel worried, because whenever a film has a troubled production, I mean, not all the time, Back to the Future famously had a troubled production, and look how amazing that film turned out, as did Apocalypse Now, and look how amazing that film turned out, well, for the most part, but that's another topic for another day. However, with this movie, I don't know, just something about it didn't sit right. That basically we had 3 directs on this movie, and it was coming out in May of 2018, and why wasn't it delayed? If it went through that much trouble in production, you'd think it'd be delayed. Like Rogue One had a trouble production, and look how amazing Rogue One turned out, but it was delayed. It was originally meant to come out in the summer of 2016, but it was delayed until Christmas 2016, and I think for better. And I was worried going into the cinema that this film was going to feel like it was just sort of pieced together last minute, and that it didn't really have a vision. I was worried that this wasn't going to have a vision and feel like it was made by a committee. Nevertheless, as what he said, I was still excited about seeing this movie at the cinema, because it was a new Star Wars movie. Every single time a new Star Wars film comes out at the cinema, every single time a new Star Wars thing comes out, really, I get excited. Yes, even with the TV shows, I still get excited about new Star Wars content to this day, and that was no different all the way back in 2018. So I remember going into the cinema to watch this film, and I remember it feeling kind of surreal, because I was like, wasn't that long ago that I watched the last Star Wars movie at the cinema? And I also remember going into the cinema to watch the film, hoping for the best, truly hoping for the best, hoping to be pleasantly surprised by this film, and hoping to come out and go, you know what, that film felt necessary, that's changed my perspective on Han Solo as a character, and that's actually a much better movie than I thought it was going to be. That's what I went to the cinema. Those were the hopes that I went into the cinema watching this film with. And about 2.5 hours later, after I came out of the cinema after watching this film, I remember trying to convince myself that I had enjoyed this movie, that I had even loved this film. I remember saying to my family members, you know what, Solo was fantastic. I remember saying to people that I saw the band, the youth band that I was at and still at, by the way, still help out at. I remember saying to them there, oh yeah, Solo was brilliant, I think you should all go and see it. And then I went to go and see it again with my mates, and my liking of it decreased. And I only saw it twice in the cinema, which is unheard of me with a Star Wars movie. Usually I go and watch a Star Wars movie at least 3 times at the cinema. That being said, I only saw Rogue One twice at the cinema, but still, I would have gone to watch this more times if I enjoyed it more. That's the point I'm making. I thought it was telling that I only watched this film twice at the cinema, and I didn't go back to watch it at the cinema after I saw it with my mates. I waited till it came out on DVD, and deep down, I was reluctant to watch it on DVD. I would say to everybody around me, I can't wait to watch Solo on DVD. I can't wait till it comes out on DVD. But I secretly didn't feel like that. I secretly didn't feel that. I secretly didn't really feel like I wanted to watch it on DVD. So when I did get the opportunity to watch it on DVD, and how many times I'm going to say DVD in the space of 30 seconds, but I'm going to say it again here. When I did get to watch it on DVD, I remember just feeling disappointed all over again, and the more I rewatch this movie, the more I feel disappointed by it, to the point that I haven't rewatched it that many times, compared to other Disney Star Wars movies that have come out, like, say, Rogue One, or like, say, The Last Jedi, which I've watched innumerable times. I can probably count on my 2 hands how many times I've rewatched Solo. I think it's about 8 times, because it's the one Star Wars movie that I never feel compelled to rewatch. Even something like Attack of the Clones, which is my least favourite Star Wars movie, I will still rewatch that film, because to me, at least it's integral to the Star Wars story, to the Star Wars timeline, whilst this film isn't. I'll talk about that, at least in my opinion, a bit later on in this review. And When I rewatched the film last night for this review today, I'm afraid to say that yet again this film did not work for me. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I truly don't. Honestly, when I sat down to rewatch it yesterday, I had in my head that I thought it was much worse than it ended up being. It was fine whilst I was on. It moved at perfectly fine pace. I do think the pace in the film is off, but I don't think that's the biggest problem with the movie. It was fine whilst it was on. It was okay. I don't think this is a bad movie, but the problem, at least for me, is that it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie. It doesn't feel like it earns that Star Wars title, and it doesn't feel like it needs to be. It doesn't feel like it needs to exist, and it doesn't feel like it properly tells Han Solo's origin story. Like, when I watch this film, I don't feel like I'm watching the same Han Solo that I see in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and The Force Awakens. I don't feel like I'm watching that same character. I feel like I'm watching a multiverse version of Han Solo, a parallel universe version of Han Solo. I feel like I'm watching an almost what if Han Solo wasn't part of the events of A New Hope, and this is what he did instead. And I don't mind that, but personally I would have preferred to see a Han Solo origin story that linked nicely up to A New Hope, because when you get to the end of this movie, it doesn't feel like Han Solo's origin story is complete, which is a weird thing to say. It feels like they wanted to make a Han Solo trilogy, which is also a weird thing to say. I don't know why that was a plan in the first place. I don't quite get why they wanted to do more Han Solo origin movies. I mean, that's what I've heard. I might be wrong. I've heard some reports that they wanted to make a Solo 2 and a Solo 3, and I don't get why. I think this should just been a one and done movie like Rogue One and just link it up straight to A New Hope. But you get to the end of this movie and it's like, it feels like they want to tell more story where before we see Han Solo in A New Hope, and I don't get that. I don't personally like that, and the film doesn't feel complete. It feels like it's part one of a larger Han Solo origin story that I don't really care about seeing, and the film feels like it was made by a committee, which is one of the things I hate to say when it comes to a Disney Star Wars movie. Say what you will about the sequel trilogy, but one thing you cannot say is that those films don't feel like they were made by filmmakers, by visionary filmmakers at that. Say what you will about J.J. Abrams, but The Rise of Skywalker feels like a J.J. Abrams movie, and the way the camera moves, in the excitement, in the direction, that film is embedded with excitement, at least in my opinion. And bear in mind, this is only my opinion. Everyone's got their own opinion on a Star Wars movie, and that's great. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but please be respectful. Don't shout at me if you disagree with my opinion in the comment section below. But anyway, when you get to this movie, it doesn't feel like a Ron Howard movie, nor does it feel like a Phil Lord or Christopher Miller movie. It feels like it's this weird mix of, all three of their visions, and then a bit of Disney's vision as well. And that doesn't come across well. The thing about Ron Howard movies, when you look at, in particular at the likes of Apollo 13, 13 Lives, and Rush, those are films he directed, which are telling stories which everybody knows the outcome. I mean, if you don't know the outcome, then I'm not going to spoil it for you, but everybody already knows the outcome of Apollo 13. Everybody knows what happened to the astronauts in that movie. Yet when I watch Apollo 13, Ron Howard does this great job in that movie of making me think, maybe I don't know how this ends up for the astronauts. Maybe they don't get out alive. Spoiled a bit there, but you get the point I'm making. And he does the same in Rush, and he does the same in 13 Lives. I was watching 13 Lives thinking, I don't know if these kids in Thailand are going to get out of this cave. Yet when I watch Solo, the stakes aren't high, the peril isn't high, and I'm just like, well, yeah, Han Solo's going to get into some problems, and we've seen this movie, he's going to get into some sticky situations, and he might have a gun, aimed at him, but the reality is not a gun, sorry, a laser. He might have a laser or something aimed at him. He might be in a near-death situation, but I know he makes it out alive. Whenever I rewatch this film, I never think, well, I don't know if Han Solo makes it out alive. Whilst when I watch other Ron Howard movies, like still Apollo 13, I am sitting there thinking, I don't know if the astronauts make it out alive. But I don't feel like that when I watch Solo. And I do feel like if Ron Howard directed the project from the get-go, then this movie would have turned out a hell of a lot different and a hell of a lot better at that. Ron Howard is a great director, not all the time. I will admit, he's not a great director all the time. He has made some not so great movies. I enjoy How the Grinch Stole Christmas, but it's not a great film, is it? You know, and you look at some of the films he's made in the past, and it's like, yeah, there's a reason people don't talk about that movie nowadays. So maybe he wouldn't have made a good movie, but I would have much preferred to watch this film. I would have much preferred for him to be directing this film since from the get-go, because I think this film would have turned out a hell of a lot better. But instead, you get these small snippets. I mean, not snippets is the right word, but you get these moments and scenes in the film which feel like they were directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, and the chances are they probably were directed by them too. You know, there's this whole sequence in the movie where the Millennium Falcon is trying to do the Kessel in 12 parsecs or whatever, and they come into contact with this weird sort of squid creature in space. And the way that whole sequence is done feels like it was completely Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. And then it feels like Ron Howard came in, didn't really know what to do with their vision, so he kept it in the movie and sort of worked around that. And there are parts like that throughout the film where it feels like Phil Lord and Christopher Miller's vision, and it doesn't feel like Ron Howard's vision. And what you get is this weird mix of both of their visions. You get this weird mix of Ron Howard and Phil Lord and Christopher Miller's vision, and then you get a bit of Disney's vision in there as well. And yeah, you're going to always have Disney's vision with the Disney Star Wars movie. But I think Disney's vision on something like Rogue One worked very well, or something like The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi worked very well. And I might even say the same about The Rise of Skywalker, but here it feels like if this wasn't necessarily a Disney movie, and I'm not somebody who's against Disney Star Wars, by the way, I'm not, I'm a defender of the sequel trilogy, as I said in my 90-minute reviews of The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker and The Force Awakens, but though my review of that wasn't 90 minutes, but you get the point I'm making. I am a defender of the sequel trilogy, but this is probably the one Disney Star Wars movie where I sit there and I think, if this wasn't directed by Disney, or no, not directed by Disney, sorry, but if this wasn't produced by Disney and Lucasfilm, and the current Lucasfilm at that, I think that this would have turned out better, because you didn't need L3 in this film. And L3 feels like she's in there. The droid L3 voiced, I don't know if she's played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but let's say voiced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, feels like she is in there as a Disney now. It feels like Disney went, well, we need a droid to sell toys for this movie, so let's include L3. Whilst say what you will about BB-8, yeah, BB-8 is in there to sell toys in The Force Awakens, to sell toys for The Force Awakens, and well, I feel culprit to that. I have my BB-8, I have a Lego BB-8 up there that you can't see on this video right now, but I have a Lego BB-8 in my room. But the point I'm making is, yeah, BB-8 was, you know, designed to sell toys. However, BB-8 has his own, what am I trying to say here? He's got his own character in that movie, in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. BB-8 is important in all those films. Well, at least in The Force Awakens anyway. I can't remember off the top of my head right now because I'm recording this review very early in the morning, so I can't remember how important BB-8 is in the second two sequel movies. But the point I'm making is, they should have made L3 more important in this film. And I understand that she becomes part of the Millennium Falcon, but that, it doesn't feel earned when that happens. Like, there's no setup to that happening later on in the film. Like, when Lando says later on in the movie, oh, she's part of the Falcon now, I'm like, but why? Why is she part of the Falcon? Give us a proper good reason. And instead it says something to do with navigation, from what I can remember. I mean, I only watched the film yesterday and I can't remember it that much, which tells you how much it really worked me. I watched The Last Jedi a good couple of weeks ago now, and I remember a lot more about The Last Jedi than I do about this film. And I only watched this film last night. And the film does have its perks. I'm not going to sit here and completely shit on the movie, because I don't want to be one of those viewers. You know, the film does have its perks. Like, Alden Ehrenreich does a great job as this young Han Solo. I believe him as Han Solo. Again, it does feel like a sort of multiverse version of Han Solo, and I think that is reinforced in Alden Ehrenreich's performance. But I don't mind him in this film. I like Alden Ehrenreich. I still much prefer Harrison Ford's version of Han Solo, but Alden Ehrenreich does a good interpretation. And the best performance in this film, by a mile in my opinion, is Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, although I think he's retired that now. But anyway, Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian. I think he's brilliant in the film, and I would have loved this film to use him a hell of a lot more. My favourite aspect of this film is the relationship between Han Solo and Lando Calrissian, and that is focused on in the movie, but not nearly as much as it should be. That should have really been the main focus, because, if you're going to make a Han Solo origin story, tell us about how he met Lando, and the film does do that, but let's actually focus in on that. We don't need characters like Kira, played by Emilia Clarke. We don't need Woody Harrelson's characters and Thandie Newton's characters and the other characters in this movie. We don't really need them. What we do need, what we should be seeing a lot more of, is Han and Lando's story, but the film feels like it almost shies away from that. It's not confident enough to show their story more, and the scenes that they do share together are great. I really love that card game, the Sabacc, that they play with one another, and that's how you're introduced to Lando. But I would have much preferred the film to have more of a focus on that. I love the film's focus on Han and Chewie. I love how this film uses Chewie, I do. But I would have also liked there to be more of a focus on Han and Lando. And on the topic of the other characters, Emilia Clarke gives one of the better performances outside of Game of Thrones that I've seen her do. I haven't seen Emilia Clarke do many great performances outside of Game of Thrones, but this is one of the okay ones. She's good in this film. I like her. I believe in the role of Kira. But the character, I don't really understand why she's in this film. It feels like she was in this movie just to give Han Solo love interest, and I don't think that really works. It feels like they wanted to make her the heart of this movie, but also I don't think that really works. And I enjoy seeing Woody Harrelson in the Star Wars movie, but I don't know why he's in this film. I don't understand why that character's in this film. Tobias, isn't it the character's name? I only remember that because I like the name Tobias as a name, but the character he plays is not fleshed out at all. It feels rather worthless, and Thandie Newton is misused in this film, in my opinion. I like the character Rio with the 4 arms. I think that's great, and he's voiced by Jon Favreau, who is now the person behind the Mandalorian series. I think he's even been in the Mandalorian, and he's directing the Mandalorian and Grogu, the Mandalorian movie, which is coming out next year. And I think he's the best character in this film. Well, I think he's one of the best characters in the movie, should I say. I think Rio, the character he voices, is one of the best characters in this film. However, he's killed off relatively early on. Spoiler here in case you haven't seen this film. But he's killed off rather early on, and I'm like, oh, he killed off quite a fun character there. Instead of having L3, you should have had Rio come on the adventure with the characters. I think that would have been much funner, and the comedic stuff would have worked better. Because another thing about L3, I don't understand like I hate L3, because I don't. I just think L3 is a missed opportunity, especially as you had K2SO in Rogue One, and K2SO, was that perfect blend of comedic relief in Rogue One with everything else going on. Whilst in this film, it feels like they wanted to do the same thing as they did with K2SO in Rogue One, but it didn't work as well, because the comedic lines that L3 delivers don't feel earned, and therefore they don't feel funny. I never laugh at anything L3 says in this film. I don't really laugh at this film full stop, but there were a couple of moments in the comedy where I'm like, okay, I chuckled a bit, and I can see why that was funny. There's a couple of moments between Han and Chewie which I find funny, but most of the stuff with L3, well, all of the stuff with L3 at that, is not funny, because it's not well written, the comedy doesn't feel earned, and therefore to me it's not funny, and also it's not well executed. The thing is, people think it's easy to direct a comedy, whilst it's been proven time and time again with the amount of terrible comedies that are out there that it's hard to direct a comedy. And Phil Lord and Christopher Miller have done it remarkably well in the past. Look at their comedies like The Lego Movie. That's hilarious. Look at what they did with Quite a Bit of Chance of Meatballs. I haven't seen the 21 and 22 Jump Street movies, but you get the point I'm making. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller know how to direct comedies, and I think they would have done a good job. But most of the stuff with L3 feels like it was directed by Ron Howard, and although I love Ron Howard as director, I'm not sure if he can shoot comedy well. I haven't been proven otherwise with Ron Howard as a filmmaker. And so what I think you get with L3 in this film is somebody who doesn't know how to handle her comedy and just kind of feels inserted into the movie, and rather unnecessary at that. It feels like they wanted some comedy in there in order to appeal to a family crowd, whilst I think the best comedic moments in the film come from Han and Chewie, and a little bits of Han and Lando as well that we get to see. But I think most of the comedy with L3, all of the comedy with L3 falls flat, and most of the comedy in this film falls flat in general. And that's because it just feels forced. It doesn't feel earned, you know? And say what you will about the sequel trilogy, a lot of the comedy in those films feels earned. Like when Finn says to Han Solo in The Force Awakens, when Han Solo says to Finn, "How are we going to get Rey back? And how are we going to get into the First Order base?" And Finn goes, "We'll use the Force." He says something like that. And then Han Solo goes, "That's not how the Force works." I remember laughing out loud at that in the cinema. But still to this day, I haven't laughed out loud at anything in this film. I laugh out loud at Rogue One because of K2SO, but again, nothing in this movie makes me laugh. And I think that's a shame, because in the past, Disney Star Wars have done a great job with comedy in their movies, but that isn't the case with this film. And like I said before, the performances aren't bad, but I don't really get the point of why there are so many characters in this film. Still to this day, I don't really understand the point of Paul Bettany's character. And I'm a big fan of Paul Bettany. You know, many people might know him as Vision from the MCU, but he's also, I remember him in A Beautiful Mind, another Ron Howard film. I also remember him in Master and Commander, The Far Side of the Sea. He's been in loads of movies. He's a really great actor that whenever he pops in something, I usually get excited about what he's going to do. But this is, I think, not a bad performance from Paul Bettany, but not a great performance, because he's not really given that much to do. It feels like he was brought on when Ron Howard came on to direct this movie, because he's somebody who's worked with Ron Howard in the past. And yet, I'm watching him in this film, and I feel like I don't really get the point of him. I don't get the point of Paul. I can't speak apparently. I can't even say his name. I don't get the point of Paul Bettany, and I don't really find him threatening. Like, he's meant to be this sort of mob boss, but whenever I watch him in the film, I just feel like I'm watching Paul Bettany, and that's not what you want from an actor doing a performance in a Star Wars movie. You know, and I think that's kind of the same with most of the actors in this film. Because you've got a prolific cast, I feel like I'm watching most of the actors just play characters. Not all the cast, but a lot of the supporting cast, like Woody Harrelson, Tandy Newton, Paul Bettany, and there's others that I'm forgetting. I'm sure there are. I just feel like I'm watching them play characters. I don't feel like I'm watching the characters alone. Yeah, I think that's the case for about half of the cast. I'd amend that. Yeah, I think it's about the case for half the cast, not most of the cast, but about half the cast. I think Owen Lonarike is great as Han Solo. Well, he's good as Han Solo. To me, it still doesn't feel like Harrison Ford's Han Solo, but it feels enough like Han Solo that I can get past that. And, you know, I forgot what his name is now. Donald Glover. So Donald Glover is great as Lando Calrissian, as young Lando Calrissian, and Emilia Clarke is great. Well, he's good as Kira. I just think the other cast didn't necessarily need to be in there, and just in there because they all wanted to be in a Star Wars movie. And I don't blame them. If I got offered to be in a Star Wars movie, I would accept that in a heartbeat. But I don't think this film needed the amount of characters it has, because it does feel overcrowded. Especially when you get to the latter stage in this film. Like, I think this film should have ended in the second act with the mission on Kessel, and the mines of Kessel. I think that stuff works okay. I think that, you know, that makes sense with, well, it makes sense to a degree with Han Solo's origin story. But then you get all this stuff on this planet where there's like, on this cliff by the sea, and I'm watching it going, okay, what's going on here? There's betraying that guy, and there's something going on here. Infus Nest is turning out to be somebody I like, what is all of this stuff? It feels like there's way too much that we're trying to conclude in the last hour of this movie. And because of that, in my opinion, the film feels overlong. It feels like it's too long and doesn't need to be nearly as long as it is. Plus, and I'm not sure I've mentioned this, I think I've already mentioned this, but if I haven't already, then I'm an idiot. This film doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, in my opinion. It really doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, and I think that's really the case in the world expanding of this movie, or in the world building, that's a better way of putting that, in the world building. First of all, the film doesn't feel expansive enough, and apparently this film had a budget of something like $350 million, which is not surprising because, you know, multiple directors worked on this film, so that's not surprising that it had that big budget. chances are this film was essentially shot twice, and that budget is covering both versions of this film. But for the life of me, I cannot see where $350 million is spent on this movie. I cannot even really see where $200 million is spent on this film. And again, say all about the sequel trilogy, but those films look expensive, yet this film looks like it's sort of an extension from a Disney Plus episode of a Star Wars TV show. When I watch The Mandalorian now, that's what it kind of feels like. It feels like it's a movie spin-off from The Mandalorian. And I love The Mandalorian, but I love it on Disney Plus. If I watched The Mandalorian in the cinema, which I'm going to do next year, obviously because of the Mandalorian movie, but if I just watched, one of the episodes of The Mandalorian in the cinema, I'm not sure if it would feel epic enough, you know what I mean? Whilst the thing was with Solo, it was made to be watched in the cinema. It was made for theatrical release. It was never made to just be watched on Disney Plus. And yet I watched that film, and it feels like it was made for Disney Plus. It doesn't feel like it doesn't look expensive looking, you know what I mean? It doesn't look like all this money was poured onto this movie, and I wish it did. I love when movies look expensive, and yet this film had a budget that doesn't come across on screen, you know what I mean? And I don't think the world building is done well. What I love about the worlds in the Star Wars universe is how they always have something unique about them, yet for the life of me, with the exception of, I suppose Kessel, I kind of like the Kessel planet that we see in this movie, with the exception of that planet, let's be kind. With the exception of that planet, I cannot for the life of me tell you the other planets that we see in this movie. Because none of them stand out to me. There's nothing about them which makes me go, oh yeah, that's something I can believe is in the Star Wars universe, in the Star Wars galaxy. That's a planet I can see being in the Star Wars galaxy. But I don't get that feeling from this movie, and I want that. I wanted that feeling from this film, I just don't get it. And the film, as I already said, it doesn't feel like it needs to exist. I don't think it's particularly well made. I think it's produced well. I think you can clearly tell that a lot of time and effort was put into this movie. But so much of it is dark as well. So much of it is darkly lit. I don't mean dark in tone, because it isn't a dark tone film, whatever. It's not got dark themes in there for the most part. There's a couple of dark themes at the start of the movie, but they're largely forgotten about in about half an hour into the film. But the film is so darkly lit that I was watching this last night, and the sun was shining through the windows, shining through the curtains on my windows in my bedroom, and I was watching this on my TV, and I was like, I'm surprised by how much of this I can't really see. I've got my curtains closed, and I do think that some of the lighting in the film, I think that quite a lot of the lighting in the movie is too dark. I think this film's got a bit of a weird sort of dark colour palette, and something I love about Star Wars movies is when they look beautiful, is when they have all these colours going on in them. Say what you will about the prequel trilogy, but that's got all these colours in there, and yet I don't get that from this movie, and I would have liked that from this film. And a lot of this film, this film as a whole feels inconsequential. When I'm watching this film, I'm like, I know Han Solo makes it out alive, and I don't really care about the other characters. I know people have said, the other way around there. I know people have said that they actually cared more about the side characters than Han Solo and Lando and Chewie in this film, but for me, I don't really care about the new characters that we meet in this movie. So unlike Rogue One, where I meet all these new characters in Rogue One and I feel attached to them, and when they die I'm quite shocked and I'm quite sad, when I'm watching Solo and these characters die, I'm like, okay, that's fine, but I didn't really feel any attachment to you, and your death didn't feel heroic or earned, and that's something which you don't really want from a prequel movie. I think prequel movies work at their best when you feel attached to their side characters that you don't know how their story is going to end. Whilst I don't feel attached to any of the new side characters in this movie. I don't, and I think the twist with Darth Maul at the end of this film, or towards the end of this movie, comes out of nowhere. There's no hint whatsoever that Darth Maul is going to be in this film. And I remember watching this from the cinema thinking, where the hell has that come from? Because I have spoken about it on the channel in the past. I'm not a fan of the Clone Wars TV show or the Star Wars Rebels TV show. For me, the animation in those TV shows is unwatchable. Personally, I don't want to make it sound like, you're an idiot or you're dumb for liking those shows. Not at all. If you love the Clone Wars TV show, if you love the Rebels TV show, that's great. I don't want to take that away from you. I'm super jealous. I wish I loved those shows as well because of how much I love Star Wars. But I remember watching Darth Maul pop up in this movie, and my brother telling me after, it's because of some thinking Clone Wars or Rebels, and I was like, oh really? Oh, okay. I don't love that. And as far as I'm aware, they haven't followed up Darth Maul's appearance in this film yet. I know there's meant to be a Darth Maul spin-off Disney Plus animated TV series coming out next year, or this year even. I've heard that. I have no interest in it, and maybe it'll follow up on that, but I really wish they follow up on Darth Maul in a live-action Star Wars movie, because it just feels like a loose thread at the end of this film. I mean, there's a lot of loose threads when you get to the end of this movie. There's a lot of loose threads when you think about it. But to me, that's the biggest missed opportunity of them all, because Darth Maul could have showed up in a Star Wars sequel movie, and I think it kind of would have made sense. I mean, maybe it wouldn't have made sense, but at least it would have been some sort of payoff from this film. Or maybe you could have showed up in a Disney Star Wars TV series, in a live-action Disney Star Wars Plus TV series. But again, it just feels like they've forgotten about Darth Maul after this movie, and his appearance doesn't do anything for me. And I love the character of Darth Maul. I think he's one of the coolest looking characters in the Star Wars galaxy, but, you know, after The Phantom Menace, I mean, it feels like they shouldn't have killed him at the end of that movie. But after that, I'm like, okay, you've used Darth Maul in quite an awesome lightsaber sequence. I don't need to see him again. I never seen him again in this film, and it doesn't do anything for me. It just feels completely out of place. Especially this is meant to be a Han Solo origin story, and then at the end of this film, it feels like it becomes about something else. It feels like it becomes about the crime stuff in the world of the Star Wars galaxy, and I'm like, but why? I understand that Han Solo is part of that, but I just thought that the film in the latter stages becomes less about him and more about the other stuff and how this film connects to the wider Star Wars galaxy. And again, it has its perks. I'm not saying that this is a completely bad movie. I think the musical score is really solid. I think the best theme in the musical score is by John Williams. Now, John Williams didn't compose the musical score to this movie. He did compose the main theme, though, and the main theme is titled "The Adventures of Han." And I think he did that because he hadn't composed a theme for Han Solo for the original trilogy or for the sequel trilogy. So he asked Ron Howard and Kathleen Kennedy, who is producing this movie, if he could compose the main theme for Han Solo, and who were they to say no? So he did, and I think The Adventures of Han by Han Solo, you know, dun 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 dun, is a great piece of music that I often listen to get me pumped up for the rest of the day. And the rest of the score is composed by John Powell. John Powell, who is best known for composing the How to Train Your Dragon scores, which are phenomenal, amongst many other scores. He also did the music where one of the composers for Chicken Run. It was co-composed with Howard Gregson Williams. But he's done loads of scores in the past. If you haven't heard of the name John Powell before, go and look up. He has done lots of great scores in the past. There's others that I can't remember off the top of my head right now. And I actually think the score to this film is better than the film itself. But I do think it's a little over the top. I was watching the film yesterday and thinking, John Powell, it feels like he got the opportunity to compose a Star Wars movie and went all out. Just went a bit crazy with the score. And I don't blame him, because, you know, as history has proven, sometimes when you get the chance to score a Star Wars movie, like with Michael Giacchino and Rogue One, you might not get another chance. So I don't blame him, because from the sounds of it, John Powell isn't going to compose another Star Wars musical score, but I just think it didn't need to be quite as... I think it feels a little overdone. That's the point I think making. I think it feels overdone. And John Powell was a student of Hans Zimmer. You know, Hans Zimmer did the scores to Pirates of the Caribbean famously. And there are parts of the score where it feels like John Powell has taken a little too much inspiration from Hans Zimmer's scores to the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And it also feels like he's taken some inspiration from Hans Zimmer's score to the Simpsons movie, which I think is one of the more underrated Hans Zimmer musical scores. I think the musical score to the Simpsons movie is wonderful, with a capital W. But that's another topic for another day. I'll probably get around to reviewing the Simpsons movie in the near future on this channel, actually. Yeah, I'm thinking about reviewing the Simpsons movie soon. But anyway, we're off topic there. I think John Powell, when you get to this score, you can tell that he's taken a lot of inspiration from Hans Zimmer, because he's one of Hans Zimmer's students. But I also would have liked it to sound more like his own score. You do have that John Powell sounding score in there, but I don't think it shines through quite as much as it could do, you know? And I love how John Powell in this score quotes quite a bit of John Williams scores from the previous Star Wars movies, like when you see Darth Maul show up, you get a bit of the Duel of the Fate theme in there, which is the music that plays during Darth Maul, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's fight in The Phantom Menace. In the sequence where you see the Millennium Falcon doing the Kessel Run, you get a bit of the asteroid field theme from Empire Strikes Back, you know, playing, you know, da 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 dum ba bum bum da 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 dum. Down, one of my favourite themes in all of Star Wars. I love that piece of music. You get that a bit in this film. You get hints here and there of music from A New Hope and the original trilogy as a whole, and I like how he does that, and I do think this is a really good score. I just don't know if I could say it's a brilliant score. I think he did a little too much with the score for this film, and I think he just needed to tone it down a little bit. Just a little bit with the score. Still, I think the score is one of the better things when it comes to this movie, and it's one of the things that I often look back on fondly when I think of this film. And again, there's things I like about it. I don't mind the look of the Millennium Falcon in this movie. I think it kind of makes sense that it looks different in the past, and then it changes its look when you get to A New Hope. That being said, we don't get to see it properly change its look, and so because of the incompleteness of this film, it does kind of reinforce that thing to me that this is a multiverse version of Han Solo's origin story. It doesn't feel like, because the Millennium Falcon looks different, it doesn't feel like it's that same Millennium Falcon we get to see in the original trilogy, and that bugs me. And there's so many things about this film which just bug me, and I'm like, why is this the case? Why are we doing this? Like, at one point in the film we see Han Solo in the trenches with the Empire, and I'm like, this is great! This is the sort of movie I want to see. I want to see more Star Wars like this. You know, getting into the trenches of the Empire and the war between the Empire and the Rebellion, and seeing how Han Solo tried to destroy the Empire from the inside, but we barely get any of that. There's something with the Empire later on the film during the space battle sequences, but it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel set up early on. Yes, we get to see Han Solo with the Empire early on, but we don't really get to know his beef, for lack of a better phrase. We don't get to understand his hatred. That's a better phrase. We don't get to understand his hatred for the Empire when we see them earlier on. So when they come back with the Star Destroyer and get that space battle sequence, it's like, okay, this is entertaining, it's well done, but it doesn't feel earned. And that's the thing. Everything in a Star Wars movie should feel earned. And I just think that so much of this film doesn't feel earned, and that it didn't need to exist. And I think that was proven by the box office that this film got. This still to today, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, this could change next year, who knows, with the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu. But as of now, and I think this will probably be the case from all the Star Wars movies that come out, because I think that Mandalorian and Grogu will do better than this movie at the box office when it comes out. But as of now, I finally got into what I was saying. As of now, this is the lowest grossing Star Wars movie at the box office. And I kind of get why. Everybody's gone into all the different reasons as to why Solo bombed at the box office, and the reality is a number of different reasons. It isn't just one reason. I think that the backlash to The Last Jedi was maybe a case. I don't think it was a huge case, but I do think it was maybe a little bit of a case. I think the lack of advertising prior to this movie, because The Last Jedi only came out 5 months before this film released, and it's like, well, we didn't have that long to do all the marketing and really push the idea of a Han Solo movie after we pushed the idea of The Last Jedi, after we pushed The Last Jedi in marketing. But to me, the biggest reason as to why this film flopped and why this film didn't do well is because no one wanted it. I mean, you can argue no one's asking for any movie to be released, and I have said that in the past. When it does annoy me when I watch film pundits online say stuff like, who is asking for this movie? I'm like, but who is asking for any movie? However, with this film, I get it. Who was asking for Han Solo origin story? I wasn't, and I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Han Solo is one of my favourite characters. Chewbacca is one of my favourite characters. But for the life of me, I don't understand why they decided to make this as their second spin-off movie after the success of Rogue One. What I really think they should have done, because I'm sure they'd announced an Obi-Wan spin-off by this point. I think they announced it as an Obi-Wan movie as well. What I think they should have done is do an Obi-Wan movie first, and actually make the Obi-Wan spin-off into a movie, not a TV show, because even so I'm one of the defenders of the Obi-Wan TV show, I do at the end of the day think that TV show should have been a film, and then you should have got off the success of the Obi-Wan Kenobi film, because I think that would have been a success because of how many people wanted to see Ewan McGregor return in the role of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then following the success of Obi-Wan Kenobi with Solo. And you can argue they kind of did that anyway because Rogue One was this great success and they followed on the success of Rogue One with Solo. But because of Han Solo's death in The Force Awakens, I remember thinking, what's it going to make people not want to see a Han Solo movie even more so, unless Han Solo returns in The Last Jedi, which of course he didn't. So what you get in this movie is the story about a character where we already know his fate, we already know his story, and we're finding out more about his story, but it's not making us change anything, it's not making us think any differently about his story than we've already thought. And it's because of that, it just... I'm not surprised the movie failed at the box office. I don't know who was asking for it, and I don't know why they decided to make it, and I don't know why they decided to do it as the first spin-off after Rogue One. Like, Rogue One, people were asking about that movie. I remember people going, oh, I wonder how difficult it was for the Rebellion to get the Death Star planned. Well, I still, to this day, don't understand why they made a Han Solo origin story. I don't get it. I truly don't. And I've seen the film quite a few times. And again, the film is fine. It has a lot of problems I haven't even gone to yet. Like, I don't really like how Han Solo gets his name. I think that's done bad. When that Imperial officer is asking, what's your name? And he goes, Han, what's your people? And he goes, I don't have people. And he goes, hey, Han Solo. And I'm like, okay, here we go. I didn't like that. I don't like all this stuff, all the focus on the dice in this film. It just feels very fan servicey, and I don't mind fan service in Star Wars, but that doesn't really work for me. And the other parts of this, I'm like, why does Han Solo and Chewie have a shower scene? I think that is unnecessary and just kind of, you know, it's like jangling the keys, or in this case, the golden dice that Han Solo has, and he's blindfolded in front of the fans and going, okay, look, we're doing this in this film, and hopefully you guys are going to like it, hopefully you guys will enjoy the movie. But it just, none of it feels earned, none of it feels like it just needs to exist. And that's the thing at the end of the day about this movie. It's fine whilst it's on, but it's not a Star Wars movie that I want to return to time and time again. And I think that's also because it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie to me, you know? It's alright. But it should be so much better than alright. It should be. Especially as it is the origin story for Han Solo, and it's directed by Ron Howard. I mean, I know I've talked about in this review how it wasn't solely directed by Ron Howard, but with Ron Howard's name attached to this film, it should be so much better than it ended up being. But instead, it turns into this weird sort of mess of a movie that feels like a multiverse Han Solo origin story, and doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie. It feels like a, you know, sort of quirky, cool space adventure, but it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie. Nothing about this film screams Star Wars to me. Yeah, sure you get space battles, sure you get to see a lightsaber when Darth Maul shows up, and sure you get to see some cool laser battles and everything, but that doesn't make it feel like Star Wars to me. There should be something about every Star Wars movie that makes that Star Wars movie feel like a Star Wars movie. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but there should be something about each Star Wars movie, and I think for the most part there is, that makes each Star Wars film feel like a Star Wars film. Whilst with Solo, I don't know what it is about it, because it's got all those links to Star Wars in there. You see the Empire, you see space battles, you see laser battles, and you see a lightsaber, that's what he said. It's got all those things that Star Wars should have, but to me it doesn't feel like Star Wars. And that's just like the odd thing. At the end of the day, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. It just feels like, well, a random space adventure. Which is disheartening to say. And the thing at the end of the day as well, and this is the last thing I'll say before I give my rating, is I think that if this wasn't a Star Wars movie, and if this wasn't a Han Solo origin story, heck, if this was a Star Wars movie but not a Han Solo origin story, I might prefer it. I still would probably have the problem that, you know, it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, but if it was just a movie about a random character in the Star Wars galaxy trying to make his way, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'd buy this a lot more. I would enjoy it probably a lot more. Because it's a Han Solo origin story, I feel like it's got so much wasted potential in there, and it doesn't do anything new to the Han Solo character. Yeah, we get to learn they had a love interest before he met Leia, but it's like, okay, why? What does that do to anything? We get to see how he meets Chewie and Lando, but we need to see that. And at the end of the day, we didn't. And I think that's the problem with Solo. We didn't need to see it, and that's why it doesn't work, in my opinion. And so, all in all, although I don't hate this film, it is probably my least favourite Star Wars movie, as it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie. And that is why I'm going to say that Solo, A Star Wars Story, I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10. I would give it high because I didn't hate watching it yesterday. I didn't really even dislike watching it. I thought I was going to really have a disdain to this film while I was watching it yesterday, but I didn't, and therefore I would give it higher, because usually I give a film a 6 out of 10 or higher if I at least enjoyed it, and I didn't not enjoy myself whilst watching this film yesterday, you know. But I didn't come away from it thinking, but that was a great movie, you know. It hasn't stuck with me, and it's just so much about it. I'm like, yeah, it had the opportunity to be so much better, and I think it let itself down as a Star Wars movie on top of everything else, and as a Han Solo origin story. I will say, I think the train sequence in this film is the best sequence in this film by a mile. I love that train sequence. You know, whenever I rewatch this film, which again hasn't been that many times, whenever I rewatch this film, I always look forward to the train sequence, and then I feel the film kind of slips away after that. But the train sequence, I think, works really, really well. However, I wish I could say the same about the rest of the movie. You know, it's not badly produced, but it feels like it's made by committee, and that's not what a Star Wars movie should feel like when it's quote-unquote directed by Ron Howard. The musical score doesn't hit quite as well as you want it to, because the new themes, which is one thing I did discuss when I was talking about the musical score, but the new themes don't really capture you as much as you want them to. Like, the new themes in all of John Williams' musical scores, in all of John Williams' Star Wars musical scores, capture you and they stick in your head. You know, I remember all these people talking about how they were humming Rey's theme coming out of The Force Awakens. Until this day, people still talk about the Imperial March, and there's music in the Star Wars prequels, like the theme for Anakin and Padme from Attack of the Clones, which still I will hum to myself to this day, but I haven't heard anyone going about the new themes to this one, because I don't think they stick with you. The new themes aren't bad, but they're just not great. You know, the musical score isn't a bad score. It's a really good score that fits well with the film, but it's not a great score. You know, and it should have been a great score. And I think it's because it's a little over the top as well. And the film, yeah, it's a mess at the end of the day. That feels incomplete, that doesn't really go anywhere when you think about it. Like, the whole final act of the film feels like it's just a bunch of random things put together, and that's what this film feels like to me. It feels like a bunch of random ideas put together, and that it was shot by 3 different people, and Disney had final cuts in it as well, which they have in all of their movies, but it feels like Disney really had final cuts on this film, you know? It feels quite chopped up, and it's just, the adventure doesn't feel exciting as well. It doesn't feel adventurous enough. It doesn't feel expansive enough. It doesn't feel expensive enough as well. It's just, there's so much about this movie. It's like, oh, you had the opportunity to do something great. You had the opportunity to prove everybody wrong with this film. Like, all these people going into the movie questioning, like myself, why are we getting a Han Solo origin story? You had the opportunity to prove all those people wrong, and yet you've made this film, and in my opinion, just proved all those people correct, including myself, and I'm barely ever proven correct, but it just proved all those people correct that you should not have made a Han Solo origin story. And again, if you enjoy this film, I don't want to take that away from you. You know, everyone has their own opinion on the movie, and I spoke about it's my view of The Last Jedi, and in my view of The Rise of Skywalker. You know, the analogy that the Star Wars movies, everything Star Wars, everything that is made in the Star Wars galaxy, it's like a menu at a restaurant. Some of the things on the menu you're going to absolutely love and get every time you go to the restaurant. Some of the things on the menu you're going to like but not love, and that's fine. And some of the things on the menu are just not going to be for you. And you know what? Solo, a Star Wars story, is one of those things on the menu that isn't for me. And I'm okay about that. You know? I'm not going to moan about it to death. I feel bored kind of talking about my dissatisfaction about this film up to this point of this review already. So, you know, I'm not one of those people that are going to completely shit on this movie left, right and centre. I just think, to conclude this review today, that it doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie, and that it doesn't do anything to change my perception of the Han Solo character. And, well, as what he said, and as I put in the title of this podcast today, of this review today, it doesn't need to exist. And I think it's just a lot of wasted effort on something that feels unnecessary, which is a shame to say. There are parts of it I really like Han and Chewie's storyline. I think that's wonderful to watch. But so much of the film, I feel, it's just... It's not good enough, in my opinion. It's alright, but mostly forgettable. And like I've already said, unnecessary. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Solo, a Star Wars story, is a 5.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Solo, a Star Wars story, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And that is it for my Star Wars reviews for now. I'm going to take a break from doing my Star Wars reviews for a bit because it takes so much time to do, and I want to review other stuff on this channel, other franchises I haven't reviewed yet. So that's it for my Star Wars reviews for now, but I think leading up to The Mandalorian and Grogu, which comes out May next year, if I'm not mistaken, I will probably go back to looking and reviewing the Star Wars Disney Plus shows, particularly The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, and so on. So I will go back to doing my Star Wars reviews probably in the new year. Maybe before the new year, who knows? And I know the new year is long away, but I've got lots that I want to do before then, and I think I'm going to be quite busy come September onwards. So yes, I won't be doing many Star Wars reviews, well, I won't be doing any Star Wars reviews for quite a bit of time now, but I hope you enjoyed my sort of resurgence of Star Wars reviews on this channel for the short time that I have been doing them. And if you haven't yet, please do go and check out my reviews of, you know, Force Awakens. Well, check out my reviews of Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker, because it takes so much time to make those reviews. It takes so much time to record the reviews, to edit these reviews, and so it really is appreciated when people check out those reviews. And if you did enjoy this review, enjoyed my review of Solo, Star Wars Story, please don't forget to like and subscribe on this video, and let me know your thoughts on this film as well. And, you know, just be respectful about it. Just be respectful. Everyone's got their own opinion on Star Wars, and that's great. And I'd love to hear your opinion on Star Wars. Just don't hate me for mine. And yes, as what he said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast. And that is it. That is it for my Star Wars reviews for now. So I'm going to say goodbye with my Chewie mask. Give me a sec here. Oh, God, it barely fits my head. My huge head barely fits it. I'm going to see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.